Alrighty, welcome in everyone. Welcome back to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Apologies for kind of the radio silence last week. It was a little bit of a tough week, but we are back. We are back in business, and we got a lot to talk about. As you can imagine, we got to start with Sherrone Moore, Michigan, and all of the coaching carousel chaos. We'll talk about Kyle Whittingham a little bit, talk about some of the G5 hires because we haven't had a chance to get to those. But obviously, we will spend a lot of time on Sherrone Moore and Michigan and that saga that is continuing as of right now. Then we'll get into kind of just a little bit of a playoff preview, talk about the bracket just a little bit, break down some of the big time debates and takes, and give my overall takes on those, especially the G5 teams. Do they belong? Should they be there? Is that the best thing for the playoff moving forward? We'll talk about it all in the second segment. And then we'll finish it off with a little bit of just a headline bowl season wrap up. We'll talk about Fernando Mendoza winning the Heisman. We'll talk about Army Navy. We'll get into a lot of different things, including a transfer portal that is starting to go a little bit wild, and we'll talk about that at length at the very end of the show. But let's go and jump into this chaos that is going on in the coaching carousel, and you got to start up there in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sherrone Moore has been fired, and it's been reported at this point why he has been fired. It was an improper relationship with a subordinate, with what seems like an assistant on the football team. Everything that has happened since then is incredibly scary, incredibly tragic, incredibly upsetting. It's a man that was very likely, or was losing his job, was teetering with his personal life and his family life, and now he's likely losing his freedom. Just incredibly poor decisions from Sherrone Moore from start to finish. How long this was going on, how long Michigan knew about it before they acted, all of that stuff is entirely up in the air. I don't feel it's my place to say one way or another what happened. Did they wait until after signing day? Did they wait until certain things to happen to pull this trigger? I don't know. I think we'll learn more about that. It sounds like Michigan is doing a full kind of investigation into this and how kind of unfolded. Sounds like they had investigated it 2 or 3 times prior to this and hadn't found anything substantial. Obviously, they found something substantial at this point, and that happened, and then everything that has happened since then has happened. And I really won't comment too much on that part of it, frankly, because I'm not super qualified to talk about a lot of that stuff. I don't know what is going on with that. I do know what the charges are. He was charged with breaking and entering, with stalking, with a number of different things that, again, go way beyond the football field and way beyond what a lot of us are qualified to be talking about at a moment like this. That being said, incredibly poor decisions from a man that was given an incredible opportunity to lead an incredible program and do some really remarkable things. And he made a number of really, really terrible decisions to put him in the position that he is right now. So that's probably all I'll say on that. We obviously will update as this thing kind of unfolds. It sounds like there is a court date at the very least for January 22nd. We'll see if that actually starts the trial or they push it back, and a lot of stuff will happen around Sherrone Moore over the next little bit. For now, let's focus on what's going to happen with Michigan, because that's a little bit easier to wrap our heads around, and I think is a little bit easier to just get a grip on. But for this specific job, it's an incredible one. It just plain and simple is. There's no doubt about that. Now, before I get into the specific people to watch and all of that good stuff, I think you'd really do have to look at doing an entire overhaul of this Michigan athletic department. It's not to say that every coach or every administrator or anything should be fired. I can't believe they haven't gotten rid of Ward Manuel. It's not to say he's done an outright terrible job there, but there is something with that program right now that is just a little bit tainted. And whether people like this or not, a lot of this is a PR fight. A lot of this is how do you look to other people, to prospective hires, to other, people that want to invest in college football. We'll talk about that later on in private equity and everything. You're in a position where you have to be able to start building this thing back up. I don't think you can do it with certain faces still being out front of your program. We'll see what that looks like. I think it's a little bit easier once that hire is made to clear house within that football program. In terms of the athletic department, they're going to have to look themselves in the mirror and figure out, is Ward Manuel the best person to lead us forward, or has more damage been done to his image and the image of Michigan than needs to be done going forward? Obviously, that will be debated. That will be something that we will absolutely talk about if action is made or when it is made, all of that good stuff. But they're going to have to look into that, and they're going to have to figure out where they want to be, how they want to be looked at, because I have a certain idea of what Michigan athletics and what Michigan football is right now, and I can't imagine it's the one they want to have. So that's something that we'll talk about in more time. But for the football part of this, it really feels like, as upsetting and not the circumstances you want it to happen under, I think they're going to come out of this with a better football coach than Sherrone Moore. I think Sherrone Moore did some great things at Michigan. I think he is a fine coach. I think he did some great things as their offensive coordinator prior to that. I don't think he was getting them to the mountaintop. And I really don't think he was getting them much further than he got them this year, if I'm being totally honest. Now, I could be wrong about that. I don't think we'll have a chance to figure out for obvious reasons. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to find their way into a better coach. I think there are a number of options. All the candidates that I've seen, I would lean over Sherrone Moore. That doesn't mean you're not going to lose a lot of kids. That doesn't mean you're not going to have to rebuild this thing a little bit. That doesn't mean you don't have a tough 2026 coming up. I just tend to believe from a coaching perspective, you are likely to get better in this process. Who's that going to be is the big time question, and the candidates are all over the place. This is something that we will talk about much, much more as it unfolds, but obviously, the name that everyone brought up initially was Kalen DeBoer. Everyone thought, he's unhappy down there in Tuscaloosa, and he's definitely going to want to get back into the Big Ten, back into a comfortable environment for him. He's staying. He released a statement this weekend. They came out, and it sounds like they're working on contract negotiations right now for him. I think the thing about Kalen DeBoer is maybe he doesn't fit perfectly with Alabama. Maybe he isn't quite as happy or quite as comfortable as he was up there in Washington. He's also a competitor, and he also understands that if he's the guy that can keep this train rolling after Nick Saban moves on, he's looked at differently for the rest of his life. And I think he understands that, and he's not nearly at the point where he's ready to hang it up. He is going to the playoff in a couple of weeks or next weekend. He will be playing a playoff game on Friday. He's got no reason to go anywhere. I don't think he will go anywhere. Kenny Dillingham was a name that was brought up. He'd be my number one choice, and I think he is. For a lot of Wolverines fans out there, it seems, as of right now, that he is staying in Tempe. So I would bet that does not end up being the hire. If they find a way to get that one done, you nailed it. I really think he can do remarkable things. You put an entire machine behind him like Michigan has, he can win multiple national titles. That's how highly I think of Kenny Dillingham. Again, I think he's going to stick in Tempe, and can't fault a man for being loyal to the soil there. But then we bring to the guy right here, Jedd Fisch. That would be my bet. If I was to bet right this second who will be the next coach of Michigan, I'd probably lean towards Jedd Fisch. I think he's kind of the situation that a lot of people think Kalen DeBoer is. I don't think he's all that happy over there at Washington. I don't think that's a place that he wanted to set up shop for long term, and I think he wanted that Florida job very badly, didn't end up getting it. I think he's going to want this one very badly, and I think he could have a chance to keep Bryce Underwood around, or at the worst, bring over Damon Williams, which your worst being a top 15 or top 20 quarterback in the country is not a bad thing by any means. So we'll see how that plays out. I would put Jedd Fisch as my favorite as of this very second. There's a couple other options here. Eli Drinkwitz is someone to watch. He did sign an extension, but again, extensions don't really mean anything if you're dealing with a program like Michigan. Jeff Brom, another one to watch. Jesse Minter, an interesting one. Does have a show cause, but there was a court case earlier today that kind of put show causes in an interesting position, and we can talk about that more later on, but might not be as big of an issue as some people might think it is, in my own personal opinion. Now, if you can get Eli Drinkwitz, this does change the conversation just a little bit, but if you get beyond Jedd Fisch, if you don't get Kalen DeBoer, which it doesn't seem like you're going to, you don't get Kenny Dillingham, you don't get Jedd Fisch, I'd probably write out 2026 with Biff Poggi. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, and you don't want to throw in the towel on a coaching search, but you're getting into this thing late. It's a very messy scene over there right now. It might not be the worst thing in the world to have a couple of months to get your ducks in a row. You might not be a great team in 2026, but you're the first at the table instead of being the very last one when there's not that much food on it. So I think they'll make a hire. I tend to believe it'll be Jedd Fisch at this very moment. If it's not, then I think it's going to get really interesting. Could be Eli Drinkwitz, could be Jeff Brom would be an interesting choice. I still think would be an upgrade over Sherrone Moore, and we can talk about that more if that does happen. But at the end of the day, a really tragic situation and a terrible position for Michigan to be in moving forward. There's no doubt about that. I think you're in a position now where First of all, really hope everything works out for mainly Sherrone Moore's wife and his kids. I hope Sherrone Moore is able to start piecing his life back together after this. Doesn't seem like it's going to be remotely near college football, probably for good reason, but at the end of the day, you hope everyone comes out of this okay. You hope Michigan is able to kind of build this thing back in sort of clean house in some respects and become a respectable football program again, because from where I'm sitting, they're not right now. I hope this all works out for everyone involved. I hope that there's not massive implications on this for the future of Michigan football or any of that. The reality is, we're going to focus on the football. I would bet on Jed Fish, but still a lot of work to be done here. It sounds like Michigan still has a little bit of their ducks to get in a row in this one, but it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. We will obviously update when they do have a hire, and we'll see who that ends up being. We'll see if they do make a hire or just move into next season with an interim. Everything is on the table as far as I'm concerned, especially with how all this went down. Kyle Whittingham seems to be hanging him up. This has been pushed back on a little bit that he might be looking for other coaching opportunities, so we'll kind of put a pin in that, in the retiring question mark kind of energy there. But he is leaving Utah. He will no longer be the head coach, and Morgan Scalley will take over the defensive coordinator that was named the head coach in waiting. I believe last year, summer, if I'm not mistaken, he was named that position, and they have held firm there. We'll talk about their private equity partnership, I suppose, a little bit later in the show, but at the very least, they did not get involved in this coaching search. So Morgan Scalley will be the new guy over there, has done an incredible job with that defense, and is very much like Kyle Whittingham in his approach and his demeanor. I tend to believe Utah is going to be more than fine. Obviously, losing a guy like Kyle Whittingham is devastating, a special head coach and one of the very, very few of kind of a dying breed in the world of college football. But at the end of the day, wherever he ends up, whether it's at Utah, whether it's at another program being a defensive coordinator or an analyst, or if it's just hanging out with his family and kids, at the end of the day, he is a very, very special guy and one of those guys that, for me, will go down as one of the very best coaches that has graced college football. And then we got some under the radar hires, mainly G5 hires here that we got to talk about because a lot has happened since the last time we talked, and also a lot happened in the middle where we just weren't able to get to all of these. But Colorado State has hired Jim Mora from UConn. Great hire. Absolutely nailed it, especially going into a bigger conference. This guy can handle that. There's no doubt about that. Has matched up with some big-time programs in the past and has handled himself very nicely, especially this year against a team like Duke that won the ACC, was able to knock them off late in the season. Oregon State hires Jamarcus Shepard, the wide receiver coach for Alabama. Really, really like this energy. I think this guy can totally make this a very, very interesting place to kind of set up shop, kind of in. I think the energy will kind of be the same as like a Syracuse where you bring in a couple of transfer portal guys, you have a really hard-nosed culture, might be a little bit up and down at times, but you can hit the jackpot with the right quarterback because that's an offense and that's a guy that I'd very badly want to play for. We'll see how he fills out his staff, obviously, but at face value, really like that hire. Washington State hired Kirby Moore, the offensive coordinator for Missouri. This one I'm a little bit iffy about. I like the hire fine. I think Kirby Moore is a good play caller, a good coach. I question how long-term that's going to be, whether that's him getting hired away or that's him just not fully working there. I question what that looks like without the elite SEC talent that he has had in the past at Missouri. Stanford, Tavita Pritchard, if that's a name that sounds pretty familiar, he was the quarterback when they knocked off USC as 41-point dogs, if I'm not mistaken. He was a backup and a teammate of Andrew Luck, so makes sense that this happened. He was the quarterback coach over in the Washington Commanders for the last couple of years. Very talented guy, young and upcoming guy, will be really interesting to watch. There's no doubt about that. Stanford is leaning into people that understand Stanford, and I think that's what you kind of have to do. If you're in their position, this one will be awesome to watch unfold, and I've kind of high hopes for this one. I have questions about what you can do overall at Stanford, but really like this fit, and I think they could do some really interesting things. North Texas hires Neil Brown, a name that a lot of people had forgotten about just a little bit, but West Virginia's old head coach was at Troy, had some great success there, including a massive win over LSU back in the day. This is a great hire. It's definitely a very stabilizing hire in a time when they were going to lose a whole lot of guys, and they have lost a whole lot of coaches throughout this process. Neil Brown is a great kind of reset, and I think he could do some great things there. Obviously, very comfortable at the G5 level and very motivated after a year that did not go his way. I believe he was an analyst for Texas this year, so he wants to be back in charge of a program. Now he gets that shot. Tulane hires their offensive coordinator, Will Hall, to be the new head coach. I think they nailed it. I think there were a couple different options. Once Blake Baker kind of turned down that job and decided to return to LSU as the defensive coordinator, this felt like the ultimate move. I think they nailed it. I think it's a guy that fully understands what that program's about. He has a great relationship with John Summerall, and John Summerall's already made a donation to Tulane as he's walking out the door. It's been a very, very kind of example for what a coach in Carousel should look like, what a coach leaving a program should look like, what John Summerall has done over there, and I think he's setting Will Hall up for a ton of success very early on, as Tulane has pretty much always had. Charles Huff, hired over there at Memphis, great hire. This guy has done incredible things at every single place he was at, and he deserves that big-time moment. With that money behind him, he can do special things. I talked about Brian Hartline to USF. I think this guy's a difference maker. I think he could have been hired for Penn State, and I would have said this is a great hire. I think he's going to do incredible things there and pretty quickly be off to another Power 4 job. JMU, they're going to get Billy Napier. I don't know why it says Billy Napier. A little bit juice there, but he returns to the Sun Belt. I think they nailed it. Again, with a coaching staff that's going to have so many people walk out the door, getting a guy that knows exactly how he wants to run his program. Now, he won't call plays, which is a little bit of a slap in the face to Florida people down there, but at the end of the day, he will not call offensive plays. I think it's a great fit, and I think it's a program that kind of needs that experience, needs that kind of like what Neil Brown is bringing to North Texas. I think Billy Napier brings the exact same thing to JMU, and I think they'll both be better for it. And then Coastal Carolina hires Ryan Beard, one of my favorite coaches upcoming in the world. Missouri State did an incredible job in their first year in the Conference USA. He did an incredible job for that football team, and now he gets Coastal Carolina, a very interesting program that is slated to do very interesting things. If they can recruit that area the right way, if they can hit the portal the right way, that's a wide open conference where they compete with JMU for maybe a playoff spot. We'll have to see. But at the end of the day, a lot going on in the coaching carousel world. Obviously, it all centers around Ann Arbor, Michigan. We'll see what happens with that football program is what we'll be focused on a little bit more aggressively, but we obviously will update you on what happens with Sherrone Moore, what his future looks like. I don't think it's going to be in college football. I'll leave that there. Hopefully, he's able to piece back together parts of his life. But at the end of the day, we will see how all that unfolds. We'll stick to the football. As of right now, we will stick to who they're going to end up hiring. Have to imagine it happens here pretty soon, and hopefully we can talk about it here pretty soon. But let's take our first break here. When we come back, let's just get into the playoff takes. Let's look at the bracket. Let's get into all of the matchups that we're going to see this upcoming weekend and maybe going forward. We'll talk about Notre Dame, Miami. We'll talk about Notre Dame's bowl game opt-out. We'll talk about our Alabama and BYU situation, the Group of 5 take, and my overall take in this mess of a playoff situation. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.